The central contention of our anchor course, Evolution of Consciousness, and of the larger view we call Evolution of Consciousness theory, is that humanity, today, marks an inflection point in the universe's becoming. Through the human experience, the universe crosses the threshold to meaning and sets forth into its final evolutionary period, the Age of Fulfillment. As humanity crosses the threshold to meaning, as evolution advances, and we become more conscious and autonomous, virtually every aspect of life will change. Among the areas to transform is the way we conduct our economic affairs. This is Session 1, Scarcity, in a companion course that highlights the economics of tomorrow, economics of fulfillment. To understand the economics of tomorrow, we begin with a look at our current state of economic affairs and at the evolution of economic thought and practice that brought us to this state. Beneath law, politics, and layers of academic and accounting complexity, economics is a less complex pursuit than our teachers and professors may have led us to believe. Fundamentally, economics is nothing more than the exchange of goods and services to fulfill human needs. Moreover, throughout most of humankind's 100,000 or more years of reflective existence, or however far back we draw the line, this exchange of goods and services was not central to our lives, at least not to the extent that we may think. Over the vast expanse of humanity's time on Earth, we lived as nomadic hunters and gatherers. As such, we occupied an ecological niche. Like the wolf pack, the lion pride, or the baboon troop, human bands enjoyed a place in nature, and nature provided for our material needs. Bands engaged in trade. Many even used some form of money or common item of exchange. Economic activities took place, but life did not revolve around these activities. Anthropological studies of the few, hunting and gathering bands, that survived into the early 20th century tell us that members spent perhaps a few hours a week providing for their subsistence needs, a fraction of the time spent by members of modern economies. Neither do members of the nomadic band consider the time spent providing for themselves to be work. In the nomadic lifestyle, subsistence activities are integrated into social, religious, and other activities. Life in the hunting and gathering society was not a struggle to survive, it was life. Periods of hunger occurred when climates changed and ecosystems realigned. Bands died out or had to move on, but these developments were the exception. For the most part, the biosphere and our role in the ecosystem provided for our material needs. About 12,000 years ago, this situation began to change. Driven by the desire to form less collective forms of social organization, a drive anchored in our nature as evolving beings in an evolving universe, human groups moved away from a nomadic, ecologically integrated way of life and began to cluster in the first settlements. Though seemingly innocuous, this decision thrust economics to the forefront of the human experience. At the heart of economic predominance is one inescapable outcome of humankind's move to an urban way of life. Only a limited amount of game could be hunted and fruits and tubers gathered within a reasonable distance from a settlement. As a result, we had to get food and other items in a different place from where we consumed them. The early urban community experienced a chronic shortage of goods. The early urban community existed in an intrinsic state of resource scarcity. Scarcity was a general condition in the early urban community. Inhabitants therefore found it necessary to devise systems to coordinate the way people gathered resources in the countryside, where they existed in surplus, and to divide them up in the village, where they existed in deficit. The urban community spawned systems of economic activity based on the notion that resources are inherently limited and human material wants are inherently unlimited, and that some mechanism must exist to encourage the production of goods and to regulate their allocation. Urbanization founded economics as we typically think about it today, scarcity-based economics. At its essence, a scarcity-based economic system is a way to regulate human behavior. It is a set of rules and guidelines that, based on the supposition that resources are limited and human material wants are unlimited, assigns tasks and responsibilities, and establishes how the material resources brought into existence by these tasks and responsibilities are divvied out. How, then, did the population of the early urban community regulate the behavior of its members? To some extent, regulation took care of itself. Faced with hunger, the hunter is motivated to pick up his spear, and the toolmaker is motivated to chip a spear point. When someone needed something, they made, took, found, picked, killed, or traded for what they needed. To a degree, regulation took place on its own, through supply and demand, through what we today would call market forces. Market forces alone, however, were not enough to regulate the economy of the early urban community. Under the dictates of the market, some members of the community, say those who were skilled hunters, would have plenty to eat, while others, those with less hunting skill or those physically unable to hunt, would go hungry. Left to the dictates of supply and demand, some members of the community would have more than they needed, and others would not have enough. This disparity of wealth would create tension, and the social structure of the community would lose cohesiveness. To maintain the integrity of the community, and thus to make possible further societal evolution, everyone's needs had to be met, at least to the standards agreed on by the community. This required additional regulation. There had to be rules to direct individual behavior for the common good. There had to be some form of central control. Central control, of course, had ramifications, some so significant that they touch our lives to this day. In a regulatory system, someone must make the rules. We can imagine everyone in the village gathered around the fire at night to figure out what needed to be done the next day, and to assign tasks to those best suited or to those who wanted to perform them. Certainly, this situation existed, at least in the early days of urbanization. As common sense tells us, however, it was the exception. As communities grew larger, an element of the community was given, or more realistically took upon itself, the responsibility to figure out what was needed, who did what, and who received the benefits. Urbanization and scarcity compelled us to create a governing class. Those who made the rules, of course, had to have a way to make everyone else abide by them. In addition to a ruling class, scarcity-based economics brought into being an enforcing class. Urbanization founded the rudiments of what we, today, would call the police state. The emergence of a ruling class and of an enforcing class, of course, brought with it the emergence of the class of individuals of which most were members, the working class. With urbanization and scarcity, social structure entwined with economic structure. Increasingly, society became economically based. Urbanization and scarcity also changed our view of the world. For the first time, humanity did not see itself as part of its environment, but as separate from, and in certain ways, in opposition to its environment. We derived the concept of nature, the notion that humankind and its activities exist apart from the natural world. To an increasing extent, existence was a battle to eke out of nature what we needed to feed, clothe, and shelter ourselves, a struggle to survive. Scarcity also founded our notion of work. No longer were subsistence activities inseparable from other aspects of our life. We did not go about subsistence activities because it was what we did. We did not hunt and gather because it was our life. To a greater extent than in the past, we hunted and gathered to sustain our life. Scarcity brought into being the concepts of work and labor. With scarcity, subsistence increasingly became work, and we increasingly became laborers. As important, scarcity and urbanization changed our relationship to one another. Tension existed between ruling, enforcing, and working classes. The need to allocate goods also placed individuals within a class at odds for the necessities of life. Scarcity imbued in the human mindset the idea of competition. It ingrained in us the notion that for every winner, there must be one or more losers. Our early ancestors required food, clothing, and shelter. The evolutionary drive to create less collective social structure compelled us to move from a nomadic, hunting and gathering way of life to an urban way of life. Urbanization and the separation between the human band and the ecosystem it spawned produced chronic scarcity. As the economic text will tell you, resources are by their nature limited, and human material wants are, by their nature, unlimited. Based on this supposition, scarcity spurred the development of systems to balance need with production and the social fabric, and play between market forces and central control needed to sustain such systems. Urbanization and scarcity also brought into human consciousness a worldview dominated by the ideal of nature and by the concepts of man against nature and man against himself. Scarcity ingrained in our being notions of class, wealth, property, survival, and competition. The economic practices founded in the first urban communities became the basis on which, over the millennia, we would create the global economy of today. From an evolution of consciousness standpoint, how far back in time can we trace the human drive to create less collective forms of social structure? Did nomadic culture embrace the concept of nature? In terms of humankind's social and cultural evolution, what was the settlement's function? With our look at urbanization and scarcity, we complete Session 1 in our course titled Economics of Fulfillment. We have the background to delve into economics in a more traditional way. Our course on the economics of tomorrow continues in Session 2, Economic Practice and Theory.